Please comment where you are watching in the world. Let's dive in. I don't usually share personal stories online, but I need to get this off my chest. It was horrible, and I am sorry if this is graphic or disturbing. Maybe writing it down will help me sleep a little better at night. This happened at the beginning of the pandemic when everything was still uncertain and the streets were eerily quiet. I was living alone in a small but cozy apartment just outside of downtown Asheville, North Carolina. I worked remotely for a regional marketing firm, and like most people, I turned to dating apps for some human connection. That's how I met Torin. Torin and I matched on Tinder in April 2020. He had one of those rugged, brooding profiles, beard, flannel, standing in front of some mountain range. He didn't smile in any of his pictures, but somehow, I found that mysterious instead of unsettling. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly charming. Quick wit, sarcastic humor. He said he was a freelance graphic designer who had just relocated from Knoxville. We texted for about 2 weeks before I agreed to meet him in person. Back then, most places were still closed, and I wasn't about to meet someone in public anyway. So after confirming that he had tested negative for COVID and had quarantined for the last 10 days, I invited him over for a drink. I know, that was probably mistake number one. But I was lonely, and at the time it felt safe enough. He arrived on a Thursday evening. I remember it was just after 6 p.m. because the sun was still up, casting that golden light through the windows. I had put on a casual dress and lit a couple of candles to make my apartment feel warmer than it was. When I opened the door, I got a weird gut feeling. He looked like his pictures, yes, but there was something in his eyes. Something vacant. Something that didn't quite match the person I had been talking to. He handed me a bottle of red wine, cheap, but I appreciated the gesture, and stepped inside. I offered him a seat on the couch while I poured us both a glass. We started talking, and within 5 minutes, he was already on the topic of his ex-girlfriend. So my ex, she was a total narcissist, he said, swirling his wine like he was some kind of sommelier. Cheated on me with her boss. Lied about everything. Tried to ruin my life. I nodded politely, sipping my wine, and mentally noting that this was not first date material. But he didn't stop. She actually had the nerve to press charges after I caught her texting some guy and, things escalated. I got arrested, twice, but it was all her. I never touched her unless she was hitting me first. That was when the alarm bells started ringing. I set my glass down. I'm sorry, did you say you were arrested for domestic violence? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He shrugged. It sounds worse than it was. The system's rigged against men, I could feel my stomach twisting. I tried to change the subject. So, do you have any pets? He perked up. I used to have a dog, but I can't do animals anymore. Allergies. If we're going to date, you'd probably have to get rid of your cats. Excuse me? I said, blinking. Yeah, I saw them on your Instagram. They'd have to go. Cat dander triggers my asthma. I didn't even know what to say. I had 2 cats, Junebug and Marlowe. They were my babies. I rescued them both from a shelter, and they were the only constants in my life during lockdown. I'm not getting rid of my cats, I said flatly. He laughed like I was joking. You'd be surprised what women will do for a real man. That was my cue. I stood up and said, I think I'm getting tired. It's been a long day. He didn't get the hint. Yeah, me too. Let's go to bed. I blinked. No, I think you should leave. I have an early meeting tomorrow. He frowned, as if I had just insulted him. I thought we had a connection. I think you should go, I repeated, firmer this time. He stared at me for a long second, his eyes cold, unreadable, before finally standing up. He didn't say anything as he walked to the door. Just nodded once, muttered, your loss, and walked out. I locked the door immediately and watched from the peephole until he was gone. My heart was racing. The entire encounter had lasted no more than 30 minutes, but I felt like I needed a week to recover. I blocked his number and unmatched him on Tinder. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The next morning, I had a text from an unknown number. Hey Raina, I miss you. Last night was special. I didn't respond. Then came another message that evening. Why aren't you answering? We had a good night. Don't pretend you didn't feel it. I blocked the number. Within a week, he tried to add me back on Instagram, then Snapchat, then LinkedIn. I blocked him on every platform. I stopped posting anything public. I even made a burner email to use for new accounts. But he found ways to get around it. New profiles, anonymous phone numbers. I started keeping a log of everything. Then things got worse. 3 months after that first and only date, I noticed my back door's handle was slightly loose. I assumed it was just wear and tear. A week later, I came home from a grocery run and something felt off. Nothing was missing, but the air felt disturbed. My cats were hiding under the bed, and they usually greeted me at the door. I reviewed my security camera. Motion detection showed a blip around 2:47 a.m. the night before. I fast-forwarded. The footage was grainy, but I saw a figure moving in the shadows around my backyard. He never approached the camera directly, just lingered near the back door. I called the police, filed a report, and showed them the footage. They said they couldn't do much unless something had been stolen, or I could identify the person. I didn't have proof it was Torin, but I knew. The most disturbing moment came in late August. I walked out to get the mail and gagged. My mailbox was crawling with maggots. Someone had stuffed raw meat, maybe chicken or something worse, into it. It had been sitting there for days in the southern heat. I knew it was him. I just knew. I couldn't take it anymore. I reported everything to the police again, but they said unless he made a direct threat or physically harmed me, their hands were tied. So I moved. I packed up my life, broke my lease, and moved to a small town 300 miles west. I changed my phone number. I didn't tell anyone where I was going except my sister and parents. I got a new job. I deleted my old social media and started fresh under a different name. It's been almost 2 years now. I still have a security system. I still check every window before bed. Sometimes I wonder if he's still looking for me. If he's sitting in a car somewhere, watching. Waiting. I don't date anymore. F that. So when I met Leora, I thought I was being careful. We met at a friend's housewarming party in downtown Reno, not far from the Riverwalk. She was sitting on the patio in a faded army jacket, drinking a hard cider and laughing at some joke no one else had heard. She had that kind of magnetic energy that made people orbit her without even realizing it. We talked for hours that night. She wasn't like the other women I'd dated. She was unpredictable in a way that felt exciting instead of chaotic. At first. She wore vintage band tees and talked about obscure horror films and the perfect way to cook bone marrow. She said things like, "I don't believe in owning furniture, you should only borrow the earth," but then insisted on sitting in my antique armchair every time she came over. We started dating. Slowly. A few dates turned into weekends, and weekends turned into weeknights. I liked having her around. She was funny, passionate, and oddly comforting in her own intense way. But I kept my space, literally and emotionally. I wasn't ready for anything too serious. Unfortunately, Leora didn't operate on the same timeline. The first time it happened, it was almost adorable. I opened my linen closet to grab a towel and found a small, floral-patterned washcloth that definitely wasn't mine. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand, and smiled. Leora had stayed the weekend, and I figured she'd brought her own towel. No big deal. Then I found a toothbrush, not in my medicine cabinet, but tucked into the drawer beside my razor. Again, not that weird. She stayed over enough that it made sense. I even mentioned it casually. "Hey, your toothbrush is in the wrong drawer." She tilted her head. "Oh yeah, I figured I'd leave one here. Save space in my bag." I nodded. "Cool. Just maybe, put it in the cup with mine. The drawer's kind of my private stuff." She smiled, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. "Sure. My bad." I didn't think about it again until a few days later, when I was looking for a pair of socks and found a bra tucked behind my neatly rolled shirts. I stared at it for a moment, confused, then laughed to myself. Maybe it had fallen out of her gym bag during one of her sleepovers. Except Leora didn't go to the gym. She proudly claimed that her exercise routine consisted of sprinting through antique stores before they close. That's when I started noticing things. A lipstick in my kitchen drawer, a half-empty bottle of dry shampoo on the edge of my bathtub, a pair of earrings in my coin tray, a scarf on the hook where I kept my spare keys. I asked her about it one night while we were watching a movie. "So, have you been leaving stuff here on purpose?" She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I keep finding your things in random places. Like not in an overnight bag. Just stashed." She shrugged. "I'm just comfortable here. I don't see the harm." "Well, it's starting to feel like there's more of your stuff than mine in some rooms." She smirked. "Sounds like you're complaining that your place is finally getting some personality." I laughed nervously. "I guess I'm just used to my space being mine." She leaned over and kissed me. "Don't worry, Tavian. I'm not moving in, just leaving traces." That phrase stuck with me. Leaving traces. It sounded poetic, but it didn't feel that way. A week later, I found a pair of her shoes under my bed. Not beside it, not near her usual overnight bag. Under it, like they'd been slid there deliberately. I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't want to seem paranoid or possessive. I liked Leora. I liked being with her. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being built around me without my knowledge, like scaffolding I hadn't approved. I decided to talk to my friend Jules about it. She was blunt in the way only a lifelong friend could be. "She's nesting," Jules said, sipping her iced tea like it was gospel. "You've got a stealth move-in happening." I laughed. "That's not a thing." "Oh, it absolutely is. First it's a toothbrush, then it's a drawer. Next thing you know, she's changing your Wi-Fi password and calling your landlord to ask about pet policies. She hasn't done anything that crazy. Yet. I went home that night unsettled. I started checking closets. I pulled out drawers I hadn't opened in weeks. And what I found wasn't horrifying, just unnerving. A bottle of nail polish tucked behind my shaving cream. A hairbrush in the coat closet. A book I'd never heard of wedged between my cookbooks. I even found a pair of her underwear between my mattress and my box spring. That one stopped me cold. I sat on the edge of the bed and held them in my hand like they were evidence in a trial. I wasn't mad. I wasn't even entirely surprised. But I felt violated in a way I didn't fully understand. This wasn't about intimacy. This was about space. About control. About a slow, creeping invasion masked as affection. I packed every item I could find, every brush, bra, bottle, and book, into a garbage bag. Not because I thought her stuff was trash, but because I needed it all out of my space immediately, and I didn't trust myself to fold it neatly into a suitcase. I drove it to her house the next morning, tossed it gently on her porch, and texted her. "We need to talk. But first, here's everything you've left at mine." She didn't respond right away. Later that night, I got a single text. "Wow. Cold delivery, Tavian." I replied, "You've been bringing your stuff over without asking. It's too much, too fast." Her response came in a paragraph. "I thought we were building something. I thought you liked having me around. I didn't realize that leaving a few things meant I was trespassing. You didn't say anything until you dumped my stuff on my driveway, like I was evicted." I didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had let it go unspoken for too long. But I also wasn't going to apologize for needing boundaries in my own home. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop halfway between our places. She wore sunglasses and didn't take them off the whole time. "I know I moved too fast," she said, "but you didn't exactly slow me down." I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. You did anyway. We sat in silence for a few minutes. "I think we want different things," I finally said. She nodded. And that was it. We didn't scream at each other. We didn't cry. We just quietly unraveled something that had looked like love, but was really just an overgrown vine clinging to the wrong wall. A few weeks later, I found one last thing. It was a ring, not an engagement ring, but a vintage silver one she always wore, tucked into the lining of my winter coat. I hadn't worn it in months. I stared at it for a long time. I never returned it. Maybe that makes me petty. Maybe it makes me symbolic. But to me, that ring was more than jewelry. It was the final trace, and I was finally ready to leave it behind. Let me start by saying that I'm not a confrontational guy. I'm easygoing, patient to a fault, and generally avoid drama like it's secondhand smoke. But sometimes, no matter how laid back you are, you end up in situations that make you question your own sanity. This story is about one of those times, a relationship that started with chemistry and ended with surveillance-level dysfunction. I met Zarina at a downtown coffee shop I worked at part-time while finishing my degree in environmental engineering at Northern Arizona University. She was a regular, always ordering an Americano with oat milk and cinnamon on top. Not stirred, never stirred. She had this way of leaning over the counter that made you feel like she was letting you in on a secret. Sharp eyes, witty comebacks, always reading obscure poetry or writing in a leather-bound notebook like she was curating her own mythology. We started talking. First about coffee, then about books, then about everything. She was magnetic, and I got pulled in fast. Within a few weeks, we were going on hikes in Oak Creek Canyon, eating Korean barbecue out of to-go containers in my car, and spending late nights watching foreign films with subtitles she insisted on reading out loud. I was hooked. I thought I'd found someone who was a little strange in the best way. That was before I realized she didn't believe in boundaries. The first red flag came in the form of a surprise visit. It was a Thursday night. I was supposed to meet up with my friend Renzo to play pool at a dive bar just off Route 66. I never told Zarina, mostly because we hadn't made plans, and I didn't think I had to check in with her about every social move I made. I was finishing my second drink when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Zarina. "You're at Jack's?" I blinked. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't mentioned it. I texted back. "Yeah, how'd you know?" No response. 5 minutes later, she walked into the bar. She made a beeline for me, her expression unreadable. "I was just in the area," she said, sliding into the booth next to me. I laughed nervously. Small world. Renzo gave me a look. The kind that said, "Dude, what the hell?" Zarina stayed for the rest of the night, barely speaking to Renzo, clinging to my arm like it was a lifeline. When we got back to my apartment, she didn't say much. Just crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling until she fell asleep. I told myself it was a coincidence. A weird one, sure, but maybe she really had been nearby. Then it happened again. And again. She started showing up unannounced, at my apartment, at my job, once even at my night class. Always with a vague excuse. "I was in the area. I missed you. I had a weird feeling." I tried to set boundaries. "Zarina, I need a little space sometimes. Can you just text me before you come over?" She frowned. "Why? You hiding something?" "No," I said. "I just like to know when someone's coming over. It's not that deep." She didn't answer. Just started telling me stories about how her last boyfriend had cheated on her. About how she had learned to trust her instincts. That's when I started to feel suffocated. But I didn't want to be the bad guy. I was still in the early stages of making excuses for her behavior. I told myself it was trauma. I told myself she'd settle once we got to know each other better. I was wrong. It was a quiet Sunday. I'd spent most of the day working on a paper and had just made myself a sandwich when my phone rang. It was Zarina. I answered, but there was no reply. Just ambient sound. I figured she had accidentally called me. I was about to hang up when I heard faint voices, hers and someone else's. I couldn't make out the words, but it was definitely a conversation. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the table, figuring she'd realize she'd called me and hang up. She didn't. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. I was still listening, half out of curiosity, half out of confusion. They were talking about someone, and I caught my name. "Kale doesn't get it," Zarina said. "He thinks I'm overreacting, but he doesn't see what I see." A guy's voice replied, "You're gonna scare him off." There was a pause. "Maybe," she said. "But what's the point of being in love if you have to pretend to be chill all the time?" I froze, sandwich halfway to my mouth. We'd been dating for about 2 months. We hadn't said "I love you" yet. Hell, I wasn't even sure I felt that way. She kept talking. "He's nice, but sometimes I think he's testing me. Like he wants to see how far he can push before I snap." The guy laughed uncomfortably. I hung up the call and sat there for a minute, heart thudding in my chest. I just eavesdropped on a conversation I was never supposed to hear, but it felt like a window into a mind I didn't recognize. The confrontation. When she called me back an hour later, I answered. "Hey," she said casually. "Sorry. I think I but dialed you earlier." "Yeah," I said. "I heard the whole thing." There was a long pause. "Oh, you said you loved me. I didn't mean for you to hear that." "Clearly." She exhaled. "You listened. For over 40 minutes. You never hung up." "Well, that's a little invasive." I blinked. "You accidentally called me. I didn't break into your phone. You talked about me like I was a science experiment." She went quiet. "I'm not trying to test you," I said. "But you're showing up at my place uninvited. You're suspicious if I ask for space. And now you're mad that I heard you say something you weren't ready to say out loud." "You don't understand," she snapped. "You don't know what it's like to constantly wonder if someone's going to leave you." "That's not my job to fix," I said, trying to stay calm. "You need to talk to someone professionally. Because this isn't healthy." She hung up. 2 days later, she showed up at my apartment again. This time, I didn't answer the door. She texted, "I know you're home. I saw your car." Then, "Are you ghosting me?" Then, "I just want to talk." I replied, "I'm not ready to talk. Please give me space." I sat in silence for another 15 minutes until I heard her walking away. Later that night, I got another call. It was her. Again. But she didn't speak. I heard breathing. Heavy, uneven. I waited. Then I said, "Zarina, if you're there, I'm going to hang up." She didn't respond. I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to her. We didn't have a dramatic breakup. No screaming match. No final text thread that could be screenshotted and dissected. She just faded out after that call. I blocked her number, her social media, everything. She never tried to contact me again, not that I know of. But for a long time, I looked over my shoulder. I kept my blinds closed. I got nervous when I saw cars parked outside my place for too long. I even changed my class schedule the next semester. I never felt unsafe, exactly. Just watched. I think the scariest part wasn't what she did. It was how fast it all turned. How someone could go from quirky and sweet to possessive and manipulative without any clear warning. Or maybe the warnings were there, and I ignored them. I don't hate Zarina. I think she was hurting in ways I couldn't reach. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them chip away at your boundaries until you don't recognize yourself. I learned that the hard way. Before I get into it, let me just say I don't hate dating. I really don't. I'm not one of those bitter guys who thinks all relationships are doomed or that women are evil. I've had some great connections and some really decent partnerships. But then there was Vela with the glossy hair, the wide smile, and a passion for movies that went from charming to suffocating faster than I could comprehend. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. It was held at a bowling alley downtown, which is about as romantic as stepping into a time warp soaked in fried food and neon. I was there mostly out of obligation. My friend Dorian was turning 30 and insisted I come, even though I'd been working 60-hour weeks at the IT firm where I was trying to claw my way out of Tier 1 tech support. Vela stood out right away. She had this confident energy, wore a vintage leather jacket over a red hoodie, hair in a loose braid, effortlessly beautiful. While everyone else was trying to bowl after several beers, she sat near the vending machine reading a film magazine. I made a joke about it. Didn't know we were allowed to bring books to parties. She looked up and smiled. This isn't a book. It's more important than that. It's the new Sight and Sound. They only publish every 2 months. That was our first conversation. It lasted nearly an hour, and we never once addressed the birthday party around us. We talked about David Lynch, Wong Kar-wai, and the underappreciated brilliance of early 2000s Japanese horror. She was smart, sharp, and refreshingly direct. When she asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. I didn't realize I was handing over access to my calendar for the next 3 months. To be fair, the beginning was fantastic. Our first date was at a cozy little indie theater in town called The Lantern. It's one of those repurposed buildings that used to be a church, now a temple for cult classics and obscure documentaries. We watched a restored print of Solaris, and afterward we got coffee at a 24-hour diner, where she told me about how her father took her to see a movie nearly every night as a child. It wasn't just entertainment, she said. It was ritual. He said it was how he stayed close to me after the divorce. At the time, I thought it was sweet. She spoke about her dad with reverence, like he was half cinema professor, half saint. She told me he now lived in Oregon and still went to the theater 6 times a week. I laughed and said, "Guess that's where you get it from." She nodded. "Exactly. It's therapeutic. It's necessary." I thought she was being poetic. I did not yet understand she meant it literally. By the 3rd week of dating, Vela started scheduling our outings around new releases. I didn't mind at first. I love movies too. But then it became every night. Monday, new A24 release at The Lantern. Tuesday, double feature at The Ridge. Wednesday, foreign film at Real Time. Thursday, cinema trivia night. Friday, we'll rewatch The Shining. Saturday, IMAX, of course. I blinked. What about Sunday? That's my solo day. I like to watch something alone to reset. But we can grab brunch after if you're free. At first, I tried to keep up. I really did. I thought, maybe this is just a phase. Maybe she's excited to share something she loves with me. And yeah, some of the films were incredible. But by the 2nd week of 6-night showings, I was running on fumes. I'd get home from work at 6, scarf down leftovers or skip dinner altogether, change into something halfway presentable, and meet her at whatever theater she'd picked. I started carrying eye drops and chewing gum everywhere because I was always tired and dry-eyed. I was falling asleep in the middle of 90-minute art house films with 5 lines of dialogue. One night, I nodded off during a screening of The Seventh Seal. Vela elbowed me in the ribs hard. "You're being disrespectful," she whispered. "This is Bergman." I mumbled an apology and tried to stay awake. But the black and white images blurred into dreamlike fog, and I slipped under again. That night, she didn't kiss me goodbye like usual. Instead, she stared at me in the theater parking lot and said, "Do you even care about this?" "About what?" I asked. "About cinema. About me." I was taken aback. "Vela, I care about you. But I'm exhausted. I work long hours, and going out every night it's a lot." She folded her arms. "My dad did this. For years. While working 2 jobs. You're telling me you can't handle it for a month?" "I'm not your dad," I said. "I'm me. And I'm trying, but I'm tired." She stared at me for a long time, then said, "I thought I finally found someone who understood." This is when I should have realized we were on very different wavelengths. But instead, I apologized. Told her I'd try harder. That I'd drink coffee before the late showings. That I'd read up on Bergman. And for a little while I did. It was a Wednesday when everything erupted. I had been up since 5:30 a.m. for a morning systems check at work. I was running on 4 hours of sleep and had just finished a 10-hour shift. My neck ached, my eyes burned, and my brain felt like oatmeal. She wanted to go to an avant-garde screening of a Romanian film called The Glass Orchard. I told her I couldn't. I needed to sleep. She didn't take it well. "You're lying," she said over the phone. "You just don't care." "I need to rest, Vela. You could sleep during the day if it mattered to you. You don't prioritize this. You don't prioritize us." I sighed. "I prioritize staying alive. I need sleep to function." She hung up. 5 minutes later, my landline rang. It was her again. Then again. Then again. I unplugged it. The next day she texted me. "I'm sorry. I just felt abandoned. You reminded me of someone I don't want to remember." I didn't respond. She followed up with, "I guess this is over then. I thought we had something rare." I said, "Maybe we did. But we're not compatible long term." She replied with a single word, "Coward." You'd think that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. For the next several weeks, I'd see her pop up in random places around town. The organic grocery store near my apartment. A bookstore I rarely visited. Once she showed up at a bar I was at with friends, sat at the far end, and didn't say a word. Just sipped a drink and stared at me. Another time, I got a movie ticket mailed to my apartment. No return address. Just a single ticket to the 7th seal. I threw it away. My friends started joking that I needed to file a restraining order. I laughed it off, but deep down I was shaken. How had something that started so promising turned into this? I probably should have canceled the date the moment my sinuses felt like they were stuffed with concrete. But I liked her Celice. She was the kind of woman who made you forget your own name when she laughed. We'd met on Hinge, swapped playlists, and spent a week texting about everything from horror movies to goat cheese. She had this strange allure, like a jazz song you couldn't figure out but wanted to play on repeat. So yeah, I wasn't about to back out just because I felt like I was coming down with something. I told myself it was probably allergies. Minneapolis in the spring is a mess of pollen and unpredictable weather. It didn't matter that my ears were ringing or that my voice had dropped an octave from congestion. I was going. She picked the place, a trendy cocktail bar downtown called Velour. One of those places where the drinks come with edible flowers and the menu has more adjectives than items. I got there first, like always. I texted her. "Here, back booth near the velvet mural." No reply. A few minutes later, I saw her walk past the bar, tall black leather jacket, high ponytail, boots that made noise when she walked. She didn't look at me, didn't even glance at her phone, just kept walking. I figured maybe she missed me in the dim lighting. I stood up, waved slightly. Still nothing. Then, 10 minutes later, she texted. "Hey, just got here. Where are you?" I was mid-reply when she reappeared at the table, smiling like nothing had happened. "Oh my God, I totally walked straight past you. Twice. You look different in person in a good way." I forced a smile. The ringing in my ears was worse now, and I could feel the start of a headache behind my left temple. We ordered drinks. Hers was something with hibiscus and gin. Mine was a watered-down bourbon because I didn't trust myself with anything stronger. I told her I was feeling a little off, but still wanted to see her. She touched my arm and said, "That's sweet. But don't die on me tonight, okay?" We chatted. She was magnetic, easy to talk to, funny, and confident in that way people only pretend not to notice. I was trying to stay focused, trying to keep the congestion from making me sound like a dying saxophone. Then the bouncer showed up. He was about 6 feet 5 inches, built like a linebacker in a tight black tee that looked like it had been painted on. His name tag, which I didn't know bouncers wore, said Drake. "Celice?" he said, grinning like they were old friends. Celice lit up. Oh my God, Drake. They started talking like I wasn't even there. Apparently, they used to work together at some upscale gym. She asked if he still did Muay Thai, and he winked and said, only when someone needs a lesson. I sipped my drink and stared at the condensation slipping down the glass. After a minute, he looked at me. You the date? I nodded. Yup. Cool, he said, and then turned back to her. Anyway, I'm off in like 20. Let me know if you're still around. She laughed and touched his arm. I might be. Now, I'm not a jealous guy, but I'm also not an idiot. That wasn't just casual catching up. That was aggressive nostalgia flirting. Still, I played it cool, until I started to feel like I was going to faint. I excused myself and asked Drake, because he was standing near the restroom entrance, where the bathroom was. He smirked and said, we're remodeling. You gotta use the ones next door. Sister bar, same owner. Just head through the alley. I nodded, thanked him, and stepped outside. The alley smelled like wet cardboard and regret. Snow had turned into slush, and I was wearing the wrong shoes. I trudged through it, sneezing into my sleeve, until I reached the bar next door. Only, it wasn't the same place. Not even close. Two dudes at the door looked at me like I was a stray dog. Can I help you? One asked. Yeah, I just need to use the restroom. I was told it was okay. The guy laughed. By who? Drake. From Velour. Yeah, no. We're not affiliated with Velour. Bathrooms for customers only. I blinked. You're not the sister bar? We don't even have the same zip code on our liquor license. I stood there soaked, sinuses throbbing, and said, cool. That checks out. I turned around and made the walk of shame back to Velour. My socks were wet. My pride was damp. I walked in dripping and saw that my seat was taken by Drake. He was in my spot, drink in hand, laughing at something Celice said. She looked up and saw me, then did that thing where her face froze and her smile flickered like a dying bulb. Hey, she said, you're back. Yup, I replied. False bathroom intel. Turns out I wandered into a bar where I was treated like a criminal. Drake laughed. My bad, man. Must have been the wrong one. I stared at him. Yeah, must have. I sat down beside them, but the vibe had shifted. I was third-wheeling my own date. Celice tried to salvage it. She leaned in and said, You okay? You look worse. I nodded. I feel worse. Her face softened for a second. We don't have to stay. Actually, I said, I think I should head out. Drake raised his eyebrows. You sure? I looked at him. Pretty sure. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and Celice followed me out. Outside, under the flickering neon sign, she touched my arm again. This wasn't what I expected. Me neither. I didn't realize he'd be working tonight. Right. There was a pause. Then she said, You're not mad, are you? I looked at her. I'm not mad. Just tired. And wet. And I feel like I got replaced while I was slipping in alley slush. She looked guilty for half a second. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. I nodded. Maybe we'll try again when I'm not dying. She smiled weakly. I'd like that. She leaned in for a kiss. I turned slightly, and it landed half on my cheek, half on the side of my mouth. A weird, wet collision of lips and cold skin. She pulled back, blinking. That was awkward. I smiled. So was the whole night. We laughed, and then I turned and walked to my car. She texted me the next day. Hope you're feeling better. Last night was weird, but I had fun. Sort of. Want to try again sometime? I waited a few hours before replying. Thanks. Might be better to leave that one as a standalone episode. She didn't reply. I've had my fair share of awkward dates. The kind where there's no spark, or someone chews with their mouth open, or the conversation dies after appetizer number 1. But what happened with Kaylin? That wasn't awkward. It was surreal. I met her online, of course. Where else do people meet anymore? She messaged me first on Coffee Meets Bagel, of all places. Her profile was simple, a few well-lit selfies, 2 pictures with her cousin at a graduation, and a bio that read, Tomboy heart, rom-com soul. I laugh too loud, love too fast, and drive too far for good tacos. I liked that. We started texting. She was funny, quick, and had this dry, deadpan sense of humor that caught me off guard. She made jokes about movie plot holes and sent me memes that weren't just recycled Reddit garbage. She seemed grounded, confident, and a little intense in a way that felt refreshing. She lived about 2 hours away from me in a small town outside Tulsa, and I didn't mind that. I was 24, working remote contracts in UX design, and had the flexibility to drive a few hours for a promising date. So when she suggested we meet in person, I told her I'd come to her. "No guy's ever offered that," she texted. "Then they're missing out," I replied. We made plans for a Saturday afternoon. I'd pick her up outside a local diner she liked, grab some food, and then head to a comedy show she'd picked out at a nearby venue. I even asked what I should wear. "Whatever makes you feel like your best self," she wrote. "But if it includes Crocs, I'm hiding under the table." I laughed and pulled out my best date outfit: dark jeans, a forest green button-down, and a black field jacket I only wore when I wanted to look like I had my life together. I filled up my car, loaded up a playlist that included her favorite band — she was obsessed with Florence and the Machine — and drove the 2 hours across the flat, windy highways of northeastern Oklahoma. I was nervous, yeah, but in a good way. I hadn't felt that specific flavor of hopeful in a long time. I pulled into the diner parking lot 5 minutes early and texted her. "Here, silver hatchback, parked by the side entrance." She responded almost instantly. "Cool. I'll be there in a sec." Gold van pulling in. I squinted at the rearview mirror and saw it. A beat-up, oversized gold van with duct tape on the rear bumper and one headlight cloudier than a snow globe. It pulled into the spot beside me. In the passenger seat was Kaylin. She smiled at me through the window. Then the driver's side door opened, and a tall, pale guy in all black climbed out. I mean all black: boots, skinny jeans, oversized hoodie, and a studded choker that looked like it belonged to someone who still mourned my Chemical Romance's breakup. Before I could process what was happening, he walked around the van and climbed into the passenger seat of my car. I blinked. "A what?" He shut the door, stared straight ahead, and said, "Kaylin's my girlfriend." I glanced over at her. She was still sitting in the van, now looking down at her phone. "Wait, what?" I said again, slower. He turned to face me. His eyes were sharp, sunken, and rimmed with smudged eyeliner. "I'm not here to start anything," he said. "Just letting you know, hands off. She's taken." I looked at him in disbelief. "I drove 2 hours for this date." He shrugged. "That's not my problem. You're literally in my car. Only to deliver the message." "Did she know you were going to do this?" He smirked. "She invited me. We're working things out. This is part of our healing process." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dude," I said. "We've been texting for weeks. She made plans with me. Picked the show. Picked the place." She was confused, he said. "We had a fight." She needed clarity. She has it now. I sat there, jaw clenched, trying not to lose it. Then he opened the door, stepped out, and walked over to the gold van. Kaylin climbed out. She didn't look at me as she slid into my passenger seat like it was the most normal thing in the world. I stared at her. "You're kidding, right?" She buckled her seatbelt. "I can explain." "Please do." She sighed. "I started dating him like 3 days ago. It was kind of spontaneous. We've known each other for a while. But I didn't want to cancel on you because I didn't want to be a jerk. I thought maybe we could still hang out, just as friends." I blinked. "So you brought your boyfriend to our date to what? Supervise?" I didn't want it to be weird. I laughed. Loud and sharp. "You didn't want it to be weird?" She looked sheepish. "Look, I shouldn't have let him talk to you like that. But he gets jealous. He's working on it. Working on it by threatening strangers in parking lots." "He didn't threaten you." He climbed into my car. "It was symbolic." "Symbolic?" She didn't answer. Just stared out the window like we were already halfway through the date. I took a deep breath. I was halfway between infuriated and dumbfounded. "Look," she said. "We don't even have to go to the comedy show. We can just grab food. Talk. I feel bad. I drove 2 hours to be told I'm a side character in someone else's relationship drama." She winced. "That's fair." "I'm not hungry," I said. She nodded. "Okay." We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, "You're really mad." "I'm not mad," I said. "I'm disappointed." And weirded out. Mostly weirded out. She laughed a little. "You're handling this better than I expected. Probably because I'm still in shock." She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something like regret in her eyes. "He's intense," she said quietly. "I didn't know he'd actually get in your car. I told him not to." "Then why let him come?" She shrugged. "He said he'd feel better if he could see it." "I didn't want him to spiral." "And you didn't think about how I'd feel?" "I did. I just didn't know what to do." I stared at the dashboard. She said, "I'm sorry." "Really?" I believed her. But it didn't help. I started the engine. "I'm gonna head back." She nodded, unbuckled, and stepped out. Drive safe, Gray. I didn't say anything. Just drove. And for the first time in my life, I hit 90 on the highway out of sheer frustration. 2 days later she texted, "Hey, I know that was messy. I'm sorry again. I think you're a really good guy." I didn't respond. A week later, she sent another, "I hope you find someone who deserves how patient you are." Still, I said nothing. Some dates go wrong in predictable ways. Bad breath, mismatched expectations, someone forgets their wallet, someone else forgets their manners. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for a date where you're assigned a number, watched by a third party, and asked about your future children before the appetizers arrive. Let me back up. I met Yelira on a language exchange platform. Not a dating app, technically, more of an online community where people practice foreign languages together. I was brushing up on my Spanish for an upcoming trip to Oaxaca. She was listed as fluent in Spanish, Portuguese, and English. Her profile picture was soft-lit and formal, with her wearing a traditional blouse and looking very poised. She messaged me first. "You write very politely. Are you also polite in person?" I replied, "Only when I'm not driving." She liked the joke. We started chatting regularly. The conversations were sweet, curious, and oddly formal. She told me she'd recently moved to Tacoma from Colombia to study at a private university with a focus on literature and linguistics. I was intrigued. She was smart. Her grammar was perfect. Her voice messages had a melodic quality, like someone who spoke with intention. After a couple of weeks, I suggested we meet in person. She agreed, but with one condition: she wanted to bring her interpreter. At first, I thought it was a joke. "You speak English better than I do," I said. She replied, "Yes, but face-to-face is different. I get nervous. Myvan helps me feel safe." I paused. It felt odd, but I didn't want to be culturally insensitive. Maybe this was part of her adjustment process. Maybe she had anxiety. Maybe I was overthinking it. So I said yes. We agreed to meet at a Peruvian restaurant near the waterfront. I arrived first, as usual, and got us a table near the windows overlooking Commencement Bay. The sky was a watercolor of grays and blues, and a soft mist hung in the air, typical for Tacoma in early spring. At 6:05 p.m., they arrived. Yelira was dressed in a pale blue skirt and a white blouse, very traditional, like she'd stepped out of a painting. She had a soft smile and carried a notebook in one hand. Behind her was Myvan, tall, hunched, wearing a heavy coat despite the mild weather, and holding a tablet like it contained state secrets. I stood to greet them. Yelira offered a small bow, then sat. Myvan sat beside her, not across from her, and immediately began scanning the menu. We made small talk. Or tried to. Every time I asked Yelira a question, she would whisper to Myvan, who would then answer for her, even when she clearly understood me. Example: me. "So, what brought you to Tacoma over Seattle?" Yelira whispers. Myvan: "She prefers the smaller city. Less chaos. She does not like skyscrapers." I looked at her. "You could have just said that." She smiled shyly. "I'm practicing." Then she turned back to Myvan and murmured something else. He nodded and said to me, "She wants to know your age, your job, your credit score, and if you believe in marriage." I blinked. I'm 33. I work in IT consulting. Credit score's decent. And marriage is a possibility, but not something I decide on the first date." Yelira nodded solemnly. "Good. Honesty is rare." I felt like I was being interviewed for a role I didn't apply for. We ordered food, ceviche for me, lomo saltado for her, and waited in an awkward triangle of silence. When the server brought the drinks, Myvan reached over and took a sip of mine. I stared at him. "Excuse me?" He raised his eyebrows. I wanted to make sure it wasn't too strong for her. "She didn't order this." I did. He shrugged and wiped the glass with a napkin. I made a mental note to finish that drink very quickly. Dinner continued in this bizarre rhythm. Yelira would ask questions about my family, my income range, whether I'd be open to moving to Bogota, if needed, and how I felt about women taking the lead in relationships. I tried to answer as honestly as I could without sounding like I was being interrogated by a diplomatic panel. Then came the moment that changed everything. She opened her notebook and flipped to a page where she had written several names and numbers. At the top, in neat cursive, it said, "Potential brothers." I squinted. "What's this?" She held up the page proudly. "My list." "List of what?" "Suitors. I call them brothers." You are number 79. I choked on my water. Wait, brothers? Yes. I don't like the word ex. It sounds ugly. So when a man is no longer a suitor, he becomes a brother. A memory. I stared at the list. Sure enough, there were dozens of names, some crossed out, some with notes beside them like too loud, smelled like garlic, afraid of birds, and lied about height. Where did you meet all these people? I asked. Apps. School. Sometimes the bus. And you number them? Yes. It helps me remember who I've already considered. I glanced at Myvan. He was nodding like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. I said, So, how many brothers do you plan to have? As few as possible. I hope to stop at 80. I blinked. So I'm basically the final boss? She laughed, a light, musical sound that somehow made it worse. Maybe. We'll see. I tried to steer the conversation back to neutral ground. Asked her about her studies, her favorite authors. She said she loved Garcia Marquez, hated Hemingway, and thought Virginia Woolf needed more hugs. I asked if she liked movies. She said she didn't watch fiction. Life is already too strange. I agreed with that, at least. After dinner, I asked if she wanted dessert. She said no, but that she had a question. Would you be open to children? I blinked. Eventually, sure. But not soon. How many? I don't really have a number in mind. I want 3. Maybe 4. You seem like you'd be a good father. I smiled nervously. That's kind of you to say. I think we should meet again, she said. I hesitated. I'll think about it. She looked hurt. You don't like me? No, I do, I said. It's just a lot. Life is a lot. Myvan stood up and said, She's ready to go. I didn't argue. I paid the bill and walked them to the parking lot. Yelira gave me a soft hug and said, Good night, brother 79. I didn't know how to respond to that. She texted me 2 days later. I liked your energy. You seemed honest. That's rare. Do you want to be something more than a brother? I didn't reply right away. A few hours later, another message. If not, I will assign you a memory name and close your file. I wish I were making that up. I sent a polite message back. You're interesting and thoughtful, but I don't think we're compatible. I wish you the best. She replied with a single word. Brother. I assume I've been crossed out. When I first met Oren, I thought I'd found someone rare. He was thoughtful, soft-spoken, and read aloud from books the way other people hum to themselves. We met in a printmaking class at university in London. He was studying fine art, I was studying anthropology. He asked me what I thought of decay as a metaphor for memory. I said I wasn't sure, but I liked the question. 2 weeks later, we were inseparable. He wasn't like the others I'd dated. He didn't dominate a room or show off. He remembered little things, quotes I mumbled in passing, the exact shade of nail polish I wore the first night we kissed. He gave me a notebook and told me to write down my dreams. Even the bad ones, he said. Especially the bad ones. And then slowly he began to change. It started with isolation. He didn't like my friends. Said they were shallow. Distracting. They make you louder than you are, he told me. They don't see the real you like I do. At first, it felt like intimacy. Like he was the only one who truly understood me. Then came the rules. Don't wear that lipstick. It's too bright. Don't answer texts late at night. It's disrespectful. Don't post photos of us. Someone might get the wrong idea. He didn't yell. He never hit me. But his words were knives wrapped in velvet. I tried to leave once. Told him I needed space. He cried. Told me he was broken. That I was the only thing keeping him from disappearing completely. I stayed. But I stopped laughing. Stopped writing. Stopped noticing when months passed without seeing my friends. Then one night, I woke up to him standing over me. Just watching. I asked him what he was doing. I had a bad dream, he said. I needed to make sure you were still here. That was when I knew I had to go. I waited until he was at class. Packed a suitcase. Left a note. I moved in with a friend across the city. Blocked his number. Changed my routine. I thought that would be enough. It wasn't. He started showing up. Outside the cafe where I worked. Across the street from the library. On the platform at the train station. Always just watching. I called the police. They said unless he made a threat or harmed me, there wasn't much they could do. So I started documenting. Dates. Times. Photos when I could. Then the birds started showing up. Dead ones. At my doorstep. In my mailbox. Once in my coat pocket, left hanging outside the door. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. One night, I came home and found the words "Still Yours" spray painted on my back door. In cursive. Neat. Almost elegant. I moved again. Changed my number. Quit my job. Then for a while it stopped. 2 months of silence. I started to believe it was over. Until the van. It was a Tuesday. I was walking home from the market, paper bag full of oranges and tea bags, when a white van pulled up beside me. The door slid open. I didn't even have time to scream. He grabbed me. Everything blurred. When I came to, I was in the back of the van. My wrists zip-tied. Mouth dry. He was driving. Humming. "I missed you," he said. I didn't speak. He drove us out of the city. Past the suburbs. Into woods I didn't recognize. When he finally stopped, it was dusk. He opened the door and helped me out like we were going on a picnic. "I want to show you something," he said. He led me into the trees. About 50 yards in, there was a hole. Freshly dug. Wide. Deep. The kind of hole that doesn't happen by accident. My knees buckled. He caught me before I hit the ground. "I thought about dying," he said, almost gently. Then I thought, maybe we could both go. Together. Like a closing parenthesis. I begged. I cried. I told him I loved him. Lied through my teeth. He smiled. "Liar," he said. But pretty words. Then he kissed my forehead and said, "I'm not ready yet." He left me there, tied to a tree. Said he needed time to think. I don't know how long I was there. Hours, maybe. I managed to slip the tie around one wrist. Got free. Ran barefoot through the woods until I found a road. A truck driver saw me. Called the police. They searched the woods. Found the hole. But not him. He vanished. I left the country. Moved to India. Stayed with my aunt in Jaipur. Changed my name. Deleted every online trace of myself. I've been here ever since. Teaching English. Drinking chai in the early mornings. Learning how to be a person again. Sometimes I still check behind doors. Sometimes when I see a white van, I freeze. I haven't heard from him in over a year. But I still don't feel safe. We met at a bookstore. Not online, not through friends, an actual, analog bookstore. I was reaching for a copy of Kafka on the Shore, and he grabbed it at the same time. Our fingers brushed. It was cliché and awkward and kind of perfect. He was tall, soft-spoken, with a slow, deliberate way of talking that made everything he said sound important. He wore layered coats, even in mild weather, and always carried a pen in his breast pocket. "You never know when something needs to be rewritten," he told me. He was thoughtful, introspective, told me he was a recovering cynic, which I thought was clever. For the first few months, everything felt intense but manageable. He'd bring me obscure novels and leave sticky notes in the margins. He made playlists with names like "Midnight for the Other Side of You" and "If the Moon Could Hear Me." He looked at me like I was the answer to a riddle he'd been carrying around for years. But slowly it started to shift. It began with little things. He'd ask me to confirm that I locked the door. Twice. Then 3 times. Then he'd double-check himself, even if I'd just done it. He started unplugging electronics before bed. Laptop, toaster, lamps. "They hum when they're off," he said. "It keeps me awake." He started talking about patterns. How he'd been noticing strange alignments, license plates with repeating numbers, the same stranger showing up at different cafes, birds that looked like they were watching him. At first, I tried to be patient. I've had enough friends with anxiety to know that reassurance is a form of care. But something about the way Zephan talked wasn't anxious. It was certain, like he already knew the world was conspiring, and he just needed to decode it. One night, we were walking home from dinner when he stopped suddenly and said, "That man has followed us for 6 blocks. I looked. It was a guy in a hoodie, earbuds in, walking a dog. "That's a jogger," I said. "With a corgi." Zephan shook his head. "He's pretending." I laughed. "You think someone's tailing us disguised as a jogger with a corgi?" He didn't laugh. "You don't see it yet, but you will." I thought maybe he was just going through something. Stress. Sleep deprivation. A spiral that would correct with time. But it didn't. He started disappearing for hours. Then a full night. Then 2. When I asked where he'd been, he'd say things like watching from a safe angle or laying low. Never directly answering. Always vaguely poetic. Then came the night I came home to find all the light bulbs unscrewed. He was sitting in the dark, barefoot, holding a fork like a weapon. "Who came in here?" he asked. "What?" "The window's been moved." "Windows don't move." He stood up. "I saw it in my dream last night. Someone was in this room." They want something from me. I took a step back. Zephan, I think you need to talk to someone. I'm talking to you. I mean a professional. He looked at me like I'd just betrayed him. You think I'm crazy. I think you're not okay. And that's okay. But I can't help you if you won't get help. He didn't answer. Just walked into the bathroom and shut the door. I packed an overnight bag and left. I sent a few texts the next day. No response. That was the last time I saw him. Until 8 months later. I'd moved on. Not totally, but enough. I changed apartments, a small unit in a 3-story building near the coast. I'd blocked Zephan's number, deleted our photos, boxed up the books he left and donated them to a local library. Then one night, I heard a noise in the laundry room. It was 2 a.m., and I'd forgotten to switch my clothes to the dryer earlier. I went downstairs in slippers and a hoodie, bleary-eyed, thinking I'd throw them in quickly and go back to bed. The laundry room was dim, one flickering bulb overhead, humming like an old fridge. I opened the washer, transferred my clothes, and turned to the stacked dryer. There was a noise. Not mechanical. Breathing. I stepped back, looked at the dryer. The door was slightly ajar. I pulled it open, and there he was. Zephan, curled inside, naked, eyes wide, breathing heavily. Found it, he whispered. I screamed. He didn't move. I ran upstairs, slammed my door, and called 911. They found him still in the dryer. He didn't resist arrest. Just kept saying, "The machine is clean. I can rest now." They took him to the hospital. Later, I learned he'd been off the grid for months. No job. No address. His parents hadn't heard from him. He'd been traveling, according to the intake report, living off the land, avoiding the watchers. He'd broken into the building through the back entrance. Hid in the laundry room for hours. Waited until it was quiet. No one knows how long he'd been crouched inside the dryer. I never pressed charges. He was transferred to a psychiatric facility. I got a call from his sister weeks later. She apologized, said he was getting treatment, that he might have been sick for longer than anyone realized. I didn't say much. Cashin wasn't always like that. I need to say that first. The man I met wasn't the man I came home to. Or maybe he was, and I just didn't know how to see it yet. We met at a mutual friend's party in Albuquerque. He was quiet, leaned into corners, drank seltzer without lime, and asked questions like, "What kind of silence do you trust most?" I thought it was pretentious at first. Then I thought it was brilliant. I've always been a sucker for stillness that hides depth. He was an adjunct philosophy instructor at a community college. Read Camus in the bath. Smoked clove cigarettes, but only for the ritual. He wore rings on both hands and never explained what any of them meant. I fell for him slowly, and then all at once, as the cliché goes. He was gentle in bed, remembered obscure things I said, and once left a note on my dashboard that read, "You are the most necessary accident in my life." We moved in together after 6 months. Quicker than I'd planned, but he made it feel like a poem, like we were building a quiet revolution. Then he started drifting. He'd sleep until noon, forget to eat, spend hours scribbling in notebooks he wouldn't let me see. He told me the world was slouching toward entropy, and I thought it was a metaphor. It wasn't. I didn't see the pills right away. He was careful, but I started noticing gaps. Moments when he'd stare into space for too long, or laugh at things no one said. Then came the wedding. My best friend, Sanaya, was getting married in Taos. A small desert ceremony, all linen and turquoise and vows beneath the red cliffs. It was everything she'd dreamed of since we were kids. Cashin didn't want to go. "I don't do weddings," he said. "You don't do a lot of things. But this is important." He sighed. "Fine. I'll be fine. Go." I didn't push harder. I thought he just needed space. I left Friday morning. He kissed my forehead and said, "Don't worry. I'll be here when you get back. Or somewhere better." I should have known. The wedding was beautiful. It really was. I wore a copper satin dress and cried during the vows. I danced barefoot in the sand and drank Merlot that tasted like dusk. I almost forgot what I'd left behind. That night, back at the Airbnb, my phone buzzed. Voicemail. Then another. Then 6 more. All from Cashin. I didn't listen right away. I was tired, tipsy, and didn't want the weight of his voice dragging on the edges of the day. When I finally listened, I was standing barefoot on a tile floor, the desert wind rattling the windows. The first message was slurred. "Leora, you're not here, and I'm not here either. But I'm thinking about the time your hair smelled like oranges." Or maybe it was oranges that smelled like you. Click. Second message. You ever think about how stupid it is to be alive? I do. I do a lot. Third. I took too many. I don't know how many. Honestly, I just wanted to flatten the noise. By the fourth message, he was crying. By the fifth, he was quiet. By the sixth, I was shaking. I tried to call. No answer. I called again. Again. Then I called 911. Gave them the address. Told them the code to the apartment door. I didn't sleep that night. They called me at 3:12 a.m. He's alive, the EMT said. Groggy. Disoriented. But alive. I drove back the next morning. Canceled brunch. Lied to Sanaya. Told her something had come up with work. When I walked into the apartment, it was like stepping into the wreckage of a storm no one heard. Pill bottles everywhere. Empty glasses. A notebook open on the kitchen table with one sentence repeated over and over. How do you love someone who is slipping? I found him on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, eyes sunken. You're back, he said, like it was a question. I shouldn't have left. No, he said. You should have. I'm the one who shouldn't be here. We didn't talk for hours. Just sat. He dozed. I cried silently into my sleeve. That night, I cleaned. Collected the bottles. Hid the notebooks. Made soup he didn't eat. He didn't apologize. Not once. He just said, I felt better when you were gone. Because I didn't have to pretend to be okay. And I said, then don't pretend. But what I meant was, I don't know how to stay in this. A week later, I came home from work and found the apartment trashed. Not vandalized. Just destroyed. My books ripped apart. Clothes dumped out. Makeup smeared into the carpet. My laptop in the bathtub. A single ring of dried water around it. He was gone. No note. Just silence. I called his parents. They hadn't seen him. I filed a missing persons report. He showed up 3 days later. At a pawn shop on the edge of town, trying to sell a box of my jewelry and a broken tablet. He was arrested. I got a restraining order. That was a year ago. The apartment's clean now. Quiet. I have new curtains. A new laptop. The carpet still has a faint stain where my foundation bottle exploded under his shoe. People ask if I saw it coming. I say no. But the truth is, I think I did. In pieces. In pauses. In the shape of his silence. I just didn't want to admit it. Because love, when it's wrong, doesn't always scream. We met because of a band. That's how it started. A mutual love for a lesser-known indie rock group called the Hibernals. One of those bands that sounds like autumn and heartbreak and long drives at night. They have maybe 12,000 followers online, but to the people who know them, they're sacred. I posted a story on Instagram about their new single, and a few minutes later, a reply slid into my DMs. Wait, you listen to the Hibernals too? Are you even real? Her name was Theres. I didn't recognize it, which surprised me since Louisville isn't that big and our friends' circles overlapped. She had that kind of online presence that made you curious. Soft lighting, acoustic guitar covers, a bio that read, trying not to feel everything all the time. We started talking. First about music, then about everything else. She was clever, articulate, and had a way of phrasing things that made ordinary thoughts sound lyrical. I liked that. We messaged for about a week before I asked if she wanted to see the Hibernals live. They were playing a small venue downtown called The Hollow, a converted warehouse with concrete floors, Christmas lights strung across the ceiling, and a cash-only bar that only served 4 types of beer. She said yes, so we made it a date. I picked her up just after 7. She was wearing a faded denim jacket over a sundress and boots that looked like they'd walked through someone's coming-of-age novel. She smelled like lavender and old books. When she got into my car, she handed me a mixed CD. An actual CD. I burned it this morning, she said. For the drive. I didn't even have a CD player in my car. But I smiled and took it anyway. That's retro, I said. Some things are better when they're inconvenient, she replied. The show started at 8. We got there early and grabbed drinks, me a local IPA, her something called a Wild Violet Spritz that I'm still not convinced wasn't just soda water with edible flowers. We stood near the front, close enough to feel the bass without being in the mosh zone. The lights dimmed. The band walked out. The crowd cheered in that quiet, reverent way that fans of sad music tend to cheer, like they're excited, but also trying not to disturb the melancholy. The Hibernals played their hearts out. It was one of those shows where everyone's swaying, eyes closed, mouthing the lyrics like prayer. I snuck glances at Theris throughout the set. She was fully immersed, singing softly, her hands clasped over her heart during certain verses like they physically ached. About halfway through the set, during a song called Cranes in the Fog, she reached over and took my hand. It felt good, natural, familiar in a way that surprised me. After the show, we stood outside on the curb, letting the night air cool the sweat off our skin. She turned to me and said, "That was perfect." It really was. And then she said it. "I think I'm falling in love with you." I blinked. "What?" She smiled, genuinely, not nervously. I said, "I think I'm falling in love with you." We'd known each other for 11 days. I laughed. Not because I thought it was funny. Because my brain short-circuited. "You're serious?" She nodded. "I don't mean to scare you," she said. I feel it. In my chest. Like something clicked. I didn't know what to say. I liked her. I did. But love, that word felt like a boulder she'd just dropped between us. "We've only just met," I said gently. "I know," she replied. "But I don't need time to feel things. I just feel them." I tried to respond, but she kept going. "I think we're supposed to be something. You feel familiar. Like I've known you before." She was looking at me like I was the final page in a book she'd already finished in her head. I swallowed. "I'm not trying to be cold, but I think we're on different emotional timelines." She frowned. "You don't feel it?" "I feel something. But I don't know what it is yet." She nodded. "Okay." There was a long silence. Then she said, "I shouldn't have said anything." "No," I replied. "I'm glad you felt safe enough to be honest. I just need a minute to catch up." She exhaled and looked away. "This happens to me a lot. I always feel things first. And most. It's exhausting. I'm not judging you. I promise. But you're pulling away. I'm trying to be fair." She looked up at me again. "Do you want to go get a late bite? Or should I just call it?" I hesitated. "I think I need to go home." She nodded once, without blinking. "Right." I offered to drive her back. She declined. "I'll walk," she said. "It's not far. And I need the air." We stood there for another beat. Then she turned and walked into the night. I watched her go, the hem of her dress catching the wind like the last line of a poem. She texted me the next day. "Hey, sorry if I overwhelmed you. I meant what I said, but I respect what you need." I replied, "I admire your honesty. I just think we're in different places." She didn't reply. I haven't seen her since. But I still have the CD. I found an old player at a thrift store and finally listened to it. It's a mix of soft rock, acoustic ballads, and one track of her speaking into a mic, reading a short poem she wrote about a boy with a storm in his throat and hands full of maybe. I don't play it often, but I haven't thrown it away either. It started humbly enough on Hinge. Her name was Briseis, spelled exactly like the character from the Iliad, which she brought up unprompted after my first message. "It's pronounced Briseis," she wrote. "Most people get it wrong, but I like men who read." I do read, though mostly speculative fiction and the occasional true crime memoir, so I let it slide. She was beautiful in a slightly vintage, Hollywood glamour way. Her profile photos were all high contrast, red lipstick, black eyeliner, and dramatic shadows. In one, she was holding a cigarette in a long holder, like she was about to read someone's fortune. We talked for 4 days. She was intense and odd, but in a way I found entertaining. She quoted poetry in texts. She asked philosophical questions like, "Do you think people are born with tragedy in their bones?" I said something vague and charming. She replied with a rose emoji and asked if I liked Asian food. That's how we ended up agreeing to meet at P.F. Chang's. I suggested a few local spots that were more intimate and less chain-y, but she insisted. "There's something nostalgic about it," she said. "It reminds me of prom." I didn't ask. I got to the restaurant 10 minutes early, wearing a button-down and black jeans, my standard first date, but not trying too hard uniform. At exactly 6:30 p.m., she arrived, in a floor-length black evening gown. Let me clarify, this was not a casual maxi dress or a cocktail number. This was a full satin gown with a slit up the thigh, a plunging neckline, and a dramatic open back. She wore elbow-length gloves and carried a tiny beaded clutch. Her hair was curled into finger waves, and she had a sparkling silver hat pin stuck into her hair like a weaponized accessory. The hostess looked confused. A child at a nearby booth asked if she was famous. She glided toward me, like she was floating above the floor. "Kaylin," she said, extending her gloved hand. "You're even better looking in person." "Briseis," I replied, standing awkwardly. You look stunning. She smiled slyly. I know. We sat. From the beginning, the tone was strange. She ordered a bottle of red wine before we looked at the menu. I don't trust glass pours, she said. They're usually oxidized. I nodded like I understood. She talked fast, jumpy, poetic, with sudden emotional turns. 1 minute she was quoting Sylvia Plath, the next she was listing the men who had disappointed her, punctuating each name with a sip of wine. Jeremy cheated. On Valentine's Day. Sip. Dorian told me my perfume was too much. As if that's even possible. Sip. Elias took me to a food truck and made me eat standing up. Sip. I offered a few light-hearted stories of my own, trying to balance out the intensity. She laughed at the right moments but never asked follow-up questions. It felt less like a conversation and more like a performance. When the food arrived, she pushed hers around the plate, eating only the rice. I'm on a cleanse, she said, but I miss texture. During the meal, she drank nearly the entire bottle of wine herself. I had 1 glass. I was driving. She didn't seem to notice. Or care. As she leaned back in her chair near the end of the meal, she reached up to adjust the hat pin in her hair. Her elbow nudged her wine glass, and it tipped over, splashing red liquid across the white tablecloth onto the floor and onto my lap. Oh no, she said without moving. Blood on the battlefield. I dabbed at my pants with a napkin. It's fine. It's not fine, she said. You're wounded. She reached across the table and touched my knee. Her glove was damp from the spill. I tried to laugh it off. Minor injury. Let me make it memorable, she said. Before I could respond, she pulled the hat pin from her hair, a long, silver thing with an ornate black crystal at the top, and jabbed it into my forearm. Not deeply, not a stabbing, so much as a puncture. But there was blood, and pain, and a very real moment of disbelief. I yelped and pulled my arm back. What are you doing? She blinked, as if surprised by my reaction. It's symbolic, she said. You're marked now. You won't forget me. A server appeared at our table, just in time to see me holding a bleeding napkin to my arm, and Briseis calmly tucking the hat pin back into her hair. Everything okay here? The server asked, voice tight. I think we're ready for the check, I said, standing. Briseis didn't move. She stared up at me, eyes glassy from wine, lips slightly parted. I knew you wouldn't understand, she said softly. I paid the bill, tipped generously. When I turned back, she was still sitting, still not moving. I'll walk you out, I offered, mostly out of habit. As we stepped toward the door, she tripped. She was wearing 4-inch heels and had clearly overestimated her balance. Her ankle tilted at an impossible angle, and she fell, hard, down the short flight of stairs leading from the dining area to the exit. It was loud. Her clutch went flying. A fork from someone else's table clattered to the floor. The hostess gasped. A child screamed. Someone yelled, "Call 911." I rushed to her side. She was moaning, holding her leg. Her glove was torn. Her hair was askew. The hat pin was bent. I think I broke something, she whimpered. The manager appeared. The bartender brought a towel. A woman with a strong New England accent started directing traffic like she was trained for this moment. Paramedics arrived 10 minutes later. They loaded Briseis onto a stretcher. She reached for me as they wheeled her out. Don't forget me, she said, as if this were the end of a tragic romance and not a bizarre P.F. Chang's injury. I won't, I said, too shocked to say anything else. And I haven't. I never heard from her again. No texts. No follow-up. She vanished as dramatically as she appeared. The puncture wound healed, but I still have a faint scar. A single dot on my forearm that occasionally itches when I think about her. I looked her up once. Her Instagram was gone. Her number disconnected. It was like she'd been a fever dream in heels. So now, whenever someone asks me about my worst date, I don't hesitate. P.F. Chang's, I say, and then I roll up my sleeve and show them the scar. When I first met Oren, I thought I'd found someone rare. He was thoughtful, soft-spoken, and read aloud from books the way other people hum to themselves. We met in a printmaking class at university in London. He was studying fine art, I was studying anthropology. He asked me what I thought of decay as a metaphor for memory. I said I wasn't sure, but I liked the question. 2 weeks later, we were inseparable. He wasn't like the others I'd dated. He didn't dominate a room or show off. He remembered little things, quotes I mumbled in passing, the exact shade of nail polish I wore the first night we kissed. He gave me a notebook and told me to write down my dreams. Even the bad ones, he said. Especially the bad ones. And then slowly he began to change. It started with isolation. He didn't like my friends. Said they were shallow. Distracting. They make you louder than you are, he told me. They don't see the real you like I do. At first, it felt like intimacy. Like he was the only one who truly understood me. Then came the rules. Don't wear that lipstick. It's too bright. Don't answer texts late at night. It's disrespectful. Don't post photos of us. Someone might get the wrong idea. He didn't yell. He never hit me. But his words were knives wrapped in velvet. I tried to leave once. Told him I needed space. He cried. Told me he was broken. That I was the only thing keeping him from disappearing completely. I stayed. But I stopped laughing. Stopped writing. Stopped noticing when months passed without seeing my friends. Then one night, I woke up to him standing over me. Just watching. I asked him what he was doing. I had a bad dream, he said. I needed to make sure you were still here. That was when I knew I had to go. I waited until he was at class. Packed a suitcase. Left a note. I moved in with a friend across the city. Blocked his number. Changed my routine. I thought that would be enough. It wasn't. He started showing up. Outside the cafe where I worked. Across the street from the library. On the platform at the train station. Always just watching. I called the police. They said unless he made a threat or harmed me, there wasn't much they could do. So I started documenting. Dates. Times. Photos when I could. Then the birds started showing up. Dead ones. At my doorstep. In my mailbox. Once in my coat pocket, left hanging outside the door. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. One night, I came home and found the words "Still Yours" spray painted on my back door. In cursive. Neat. Almost elegant. I moved again. Changed my number. Quit my job. Then for a while it stopped. 2 months of silence. I started to believe it was over. Until the van. It was a Tuesday. I was walking home from the market, paper bag full of oranges and tea bags, when a white van pulled up beside me. The door slid open. I didn't even have time to scream. He grabbed me. Everything blurred. When I came to, I was in the back of the van. My wrists zip-tied. Mouth dry. He was driving. Humming. I missed you, he said. I didn't speak. He drove us out of the city. Past the suburbs. Into woods I didn't recognize. When he finally stopped, it was dusk. He opened the door and helped me out like we were going on a picnic. I want to show you something, he said. He led me into the trees. About 50 yards in, there was a hole. Freshly dug. Wide. Deep. The kind of hole that doesn't happen by accident. My knees buckled. He caught me before I hit the ground. I thought about dying, he said, almost gently. Then I thought, maybe we could both go. Together. Like a closing parenthesis. I begged. I cried. I told him I loved him. Lied through my teeth. He smiled. Liar, he said. But pretty words. Then he kissed my forehead and said, I'm not ready yet. He left me there, tied to a tree. Said he needed time to think. I don't know how long I was there. Hours, maybe. I managed to slip the tie around one wrist. Got free. Ran barefoot through the woods until I found a road. A truck driver saw me. Called the police. They searched the woods. Found the hole. But not him. He vanished. I left the country. Moved to India. Stayed with my aunt in Jaipur. Changed my name. Deleted every online trace of myself. I've been here ever since. Teaching English. Drinking chai in the early mornings. Learning how to be a person again. Sometimes I still check behind doors. Sometimes when I see a white van, I freeze. I haven't heard from him in over a year. But I still don't feel safe. There are moments you revisit in your head long after they're over. Not because you miss them, but because some part of you still can't believe they happened. For me, it's the moment a man I'd never spoken to lunged at me with a knife in a parking lot while screaming my girlfriend's name. But I'll start where it began. Not in chaos, but in comfort. I met Ziva at a mutual friend's birthday party. She was the kind of woman who made everything else in the room feel like background noise. Tiny rings on every finger, hair like obsidian ink, and a quiet laugh that felt like it had weight. She was guarded, but not cold. When she spoke, it was always precise, like she'd already edited the sentence in her head before it reached her lips. We dated for a few months before she mentioned him. His name was Corin. Just so you're not blindsided, she said one night over takeout. I had a long, complicated relationship before you. He's not dangerous, but he doesn't let go easily. I asked what that meant. She shrugged. He still messages sometimes. Calls from blocked numbers. But I stopped answering months ago. I didn't like it, but I didn't want to overreact. She showed me a few of his texts. They bounced between guilt trips and grand romantic declarations. One minute it was, I hope you're happy with him. And the next it was, you'll never find anyone who understands you like I do. It was textbook emotional manipulation. I'd seen it before, in friends' relationships, in my own past. But Ziva seemed like she had it under control. He's harmless, she said. Just loud. Then one night I saw him. We were walking downtown. It was late, maybe 11:30, after a movie and drinks. The sidewalks were mostly empty, the air heavy with that quiet that only settles in a city after business hours. Ziva froze mid-step. I followed her gaze and saw a man standing across the street. Medium build. Hoodie. Hands in pockets. Watching us. Is that him? I asked. She nodded. We kept walking. He didn't follow. Not then. But that night, she got 6 missed calls from a private number. No voicemails. Just silence. I told her to block the number again. She already had. He uses apps to hide it, she said. It never stops for long. I didn't sleep well. The next week, I started noticing things. A car parked across the street from my apartment 3 nights in a row. Same color, same dented bumper. A man in a beanie sitting at the far end of the cafe where I worked remotely, staring into a laptop but never typing. The sound of footsteps behind me on my morning run, consistent for several blocks before peeling off. It was subtle, deniable, but unmistakable. I didn't tell Ziva at first. I didn't want her to feel like she was dragging danger behind her like a shadow. But it wore on me. The tension, the feeling of being watched. She noticed before I said anything. You're quieter, she said one night. You're carrying something. So I told her. She went still. Then she said, he followed my last boyfriend too. You never told me that. I didn't want to scare you off. I didn't respond. He never did anything, she added. Just hovered. Until when? Until I moved. Changed jobs. Changed numbers. Everything. That night, I installed a camera above my door. The next morning, the lens was cracked. No footage. Just a hairline fracture across the screen and a note slid under my door. Eyes don't belong to strangers. I called the police. They took a report. But without proof he'd done it, there was nothing they could pursue. He hasn't touched you, the officer said. It's annoying, but technically not criminal. I showed them the note. They logged it and told me to keep them updated. That weekend, Ziva and I went to a friend's barbecue. Tried to act normal. It was sunny, people were laughing, ribs were on the grill, and for a few hours it felt like the world had shrunk down to something safe and digestible. But when we got back to my apartment, the door was ajar. Ziva stopped on the threshold. I pushed the door open. Nothing looked stolen, but everything had been moved slightly. Books angled differently. Cushions flipped. A coffee mug turned upside down in the sink. And in the middle of the table, a single Polaroid. Of us. From the barbecue. Taken from a distance. Slightly blurred. I didn't own a Polaroid camera. We went to the police again. They took it more seriously this time. Opened an investigation. Sent someone to dust for prints, though they warned us not to expect much. 2 days later, Ziva got an envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Inside, another photo. This one of her sleeping. Through my bedroom window. She moved in with me that night. I bought blackout curtains. Added more cameras. Changed the locks. We tried to carry on. Cooked together. Watched movies. Held each other tighter. But we were always waiting for the next unexpected noise. Then came the parking lot. It was a Tuesday. Mid-October. Leaves everywhere, the air sharp with pre-winter tension. I was coming out of the grocery store just after 8 p.m. bags in hand. Car remote in my pocket. I didn't see him at first. Just heard the footsteps. Fast. Then a voice. Hey Dason, right? I turned. And there he was. Corin. Closer than I thought he'd ever be. His eyes were wild. Hair unkempt. A long coat over a hoodie, one hand in the pocket, the other already clenched. I didn't want to do this, he said. I dropped the groceries. He pulled out a knife. Not huge, but sharp. Serrated. And he charged. I dodged right. Fell against the hood of a car. Rolled. Ran. He chased me between parked cars, yelling, "She's mine." You don't get to erase me. I made it to the sidewalk. A woman screamed. Someone tackled him from behind. A bystander. Just a guy walking his dog who saw enough to act. Corin hit the pavement. Dropped the knife. Police arrived 6 minutes later. They found zip ties in his coat pocket, a photo of Ziva in his wallet, and a folded sheet of paper with a list titled, Ways to Start Over. He was arrested, charged with attempted assault, stalking, and trespassing. Ziva and I both got restraining orders. That was 11 months ago. He's still in custody awaiting trial. Multiple psychological evaluations. The court process is slow, but it's moving. Ziva and I are still together. Stronger somehow, but more cautious. We moved again. Different city. Different jobs. No forwarding address. Sometimes I walk past a parked car too slowly and feel the hair on my arms rise. Sometimes she wakes up from dreams where she's still being watched. We're healing, but some part of us still lives in that parking lot, in the space between a man's footsteps and the moment you realize this isn't a story you can walk away from untouched. There are moments you revisit in your head long after they're over, not because you miss them, but because some part of you still can't believe they happened. For me, it's the moment a man I'd never spoken to lunged at me with a knife in a parking lot while screaming my girlfriend's name. But I'll start where it began. Not in chaos, but in comfort. I met Ziva at a mutual friend's birthday party. She was the kind of woman who made everything else in the room feel like background noise. Tiny rings on every finger, hair like obsidian ink, and a quiet laugh that felt like it had weight. She was guarded, but not cold. When she spoke, it was always precise, like she'd already edited the sentence in her head before it reached her lips. We dated for a few months before she mentioned him. His name was Corin. Just so you're not blindsided, she said one night over takeout. I had a long, complicated relationship before you. He's not dangerous, but he doesn't let go easily. I asked what that meant. She shrugged. He still messages sometimes. Calls from blocked numbers. But I stopped answering months ago. I didn't like it, but I didn't want to overreact. She showed me a few of his texts. They bounced between guilt trips and grand romantic declarations. One minute it was, I hope you're happy with him. And the next it was, you'll never find anyone who understands you like I do. It was textbook emotional manipulation. I'd seen it before, in friends' relationships, in my own past. But Ziva seemed like she had it under control. He's harmless, she said. Just loud. Then one night I saw him. We were walking downtown. It was late, maybe 11:30, after a movie and drinks. The sidewalks were mostly empty, the air heavy with that quiet that only settles in a city after business hours. Ziva froze mid-step. I followed her gaze and saw a man standing across the street. Medium build. Hoodie. Hands in pockets. Watching us. Is that him? I asked. She nodded. We kept walking. He didn't follow. Not then. But that night, she got 6 missed calls from a private number. No voicemails. Just silence. I told her to block the number again. She already had. He uses apps to hide it, she said. It never stops for long. I didn't sleep well. The next week, I started noticing things. A car parked across the street from my apartment 3 nights in a row. Same color, same dented bumper. A man in a beanie sitting at the far end of the cafe where I worked remotely, staring into a laptop but never typing. The sound of footsteps behind me on my morning run, consistent for several blocks before peeling off. It was subtle, deniable, but unmistakable. I didn't tell Ziva at first. I didn't want her to feel like she was dragging danger behind her like a shadow. But it wore on me. The tension, the feeling of being watched. She noticed before I said anything. You're quieter, she said one night. You're carrying something. So I told her. She went still. Then she said, he followed my last boyfriend too. You never told me that. I didn't want to scare you off. I didn't respond. He never did anything, she added. Just hovered. Until when? Until I moved. Changed jobs. Changed numbers. Everything. That night, I installed a camera above my door. The next morning, the lens was cracked. No footage. Just a hairline fracture across the screen, and a note slid under my door. Eyes don't belong to strangers. I called the police. They took a report, but without proof he'd done it, there was nothing they could pursue. He hasn't touched you, the officer said. It's annoying, but technically not criminal. I showed them the note. They logged it, and told me to keep them updated. That weekend, Ziva and I went to a friend's barbecue. Tried to act normal. It was sunny, people were laughing, ribs were on the grill, and for a few hours, it felt like the world had shrunk down to something safe and digestible. But when we got back to my apartment, the door was ajar. Ziva stopped on the threshold. I pushed the door open. Nothing looked stolen, but everything had been moved slightly. Books angled differently. Cushions flipped. A coffee mug turned upside down in the sink. And in the middle of the table, a single Polaroid. Of us. From the barbecue. Taken from a distance. Slightly blurred. I didn't own a Polaroid camera. We went to the police again. They took it more seriously this time. Opened an investigation. Sent someone to dust for prints, though they warned us not to expect much. 2 days later, Ziva got an envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Inside, another photo. This one of her sleeping. Through my bedroom window. She moved in with me that night. I bought blackout curtains. Added more cameras. Changed the locks. We tried to carry on. Cooked together. Watched movies. Held each other tighter. But we were always waiting for the next unexpected noise. Then came the parking lot. It was a Tuesday. Mid-October. Leaves everywhere, the air sharp with pre-winter tension. I was coming out of the grocery store just after 8 p.m. bags in hand. Car remote in my pocket. I didn't see him at first. Just heard the footsteps. Fast. Then a voice. Hey Dason, right? I turned. And there he was. Corin. Closer than I thought he'd ever be. His eyes were wild. Hair unkempt. A long coat over a hoodie, one hand in the pocket, the other already clenched. I didn't want to do this, he said. I dropped the groceries. He pulled out a knife. Not huge, but sharp. Serrated. And he charged. I dodged right. Fell against the hood of a car. Rolled. Ran. He chased me between parked cars, yelling, "She's mine. You don't get to erase me." I made it to the sidewalk. A woman screamed. Someone tackled him from behind. A bystander. Just a guy walking his dog who saw enough to act. Corin hit the pavement. Dropped the knife. Police arrived 6 minutes later. They found zip ties in his coat pocket, a photo of Ziva in his wallet, and a folded sheet of paper with a list titled Ways to Start Over. He was arrested, charged with attempted assault, stalking, and trespassing. Ziva and I both got restraining orders. That was 11 months ago. He's still in custody awaiting trial. Multiple psychological evaluations. The court process is slow, but it's moving. Ziva and I are still together. Stronger somehow, but more cautious. We moved again. Different city. Different jobs. No forwarding address. It was our 5th date, and I thought we were hitting a good rhythm. Navina was charming, funny, and sharp in a way that made even small talk feel engaging. She had this habit of correcting people's grammar mid-sentence, which should have been annoying, but she did it with such dry wit that it somehow worked. We met at a trivia night. She crushed the science questions, I handled literature and movies, and we bonded over a shared hatred of team names that tried too hard to be clever. After that, we went out for drinks, then dinner, then a hike, then a weird art exhibit that made both of us feel like we were being watched by sentient ceiling fans. So when I invited her to my friend's backyard barbecue, it felt like the logical next step. Casual, social, a chance to mix friend groups. Navina said she was excited. "I love meeting people," she texted, "and I've been craving brisket for 2 weeks." I picked her up Saturday afternoon. She came out of her apartment in a floral sundress and boots, holding a 6-pack of local craft beer and a Tupperware container of something she labeled experimental slaw. She looked great, relaxed, happy. The barbecue was at my friend Lennox's house, a big, drafty 2-story with a porch that sagged a little but had character. People were already milling around the backyard with paper plates and red Solo cups. Someone was playing early 2000s hip-hop on a Bluetooth speaker. It was the kind of low-stakes gathering I always loved. Things started off well. Navina made small talk with a few of my friends, and they seemed to like her. Her slaw turned out to be surprisingly good, a mix of purple cabbage, mango, and what she called just enough vinegar to feel alive. We grabbed food, found a spot on the porch steps, and were halfway through our pulled pork sandwiches when she turned to me and said, out of nowhere, "So, would you ever consider moving to Oregon?" I blinked. I haven't thought about it." "Why Oregon?" "My sister lives there," she said, "and I've always felt drawn to the Pacific Northwest. The trees, the rain, the sense of possibility." "That's cool," I said, chewing. but I kind of like it here. She nodded thoughtfully. But if things got serious, like marriage serious, would you be willing to relocate? I paused mid-bite. Navina, we're on our 5th date. She laughed, short and sharp. I know. I'm not proposing. I'm just asking if you're the kind of person who can adapt. Sure, I said slowly. In theory. But I don't usually make life plans during barbecue. She gave me a look. I like to know who I'm investing in. There was a silence. I took another bite just to avoid speaking. Then Lennox walked over with a beer and said, Yo, Eston. You playing cornhole or what? I stood up too fast, grateful for the excuse. Yeah, definitely. You want to play, Navina? She shook her head. Go ahead. I'll watch. I played a few rounds, tried to shake off the weirdness of the Oregon conversation. But when I glanced back, I saw her talking to my friend Kyson, one of my oldest friends. They were standing close, and she looked tense. By the time I wandered back over, Kyson was walking away, his jaw tight. What happened? I asked. He said something rude, she said flatly. Like what? He asked if I was the latest one. Like I'm some phase. I frowned. That doesn't sound like Kyson. She crossed her arms. Maybe he's different around you. I went to find Kyson. Pulled him aside. She's intense, he said. I just asked how serious it was, and she said you were already talking about moving across the country together. I was surprised. I didn't know what to say. When I got back to Navina, she was pacing near the side gate. Her shoulders were rigid, her eyes wide. I need to leave, she said. Okay, I replied. We can go. My chest hurts. What? I think I'm having a panic attack. I guided her to the car. She was breathing fast, hands trembling. I offered water, called her by name gently. She said her heart was racing, and she felt like she was going to pass out. I have a heart condition, she whispered. It's rare. I don't talk about it. I didn't know if this was panic or something more serious, so I drove her straight to the ER. She kept apologizing between shallow breaths. I didn't mean to ruin the day. I just felt cornered, like everyone was judging me. They weren't, I said. It just got intense fast. She didn't respond. At the hospital, they ran tests, hooked her up to machines, monitored her oxygen. After an hour, a nurse told me she was stable and could be discharged soon. When I sat beside her in the small curtained room, she looked drained. I don't usually come apart like this, she said. I believe you. You're probably done with me now. I'm not thinking about that right now. She looked at me, eyes glassy. I just wanted to know you were serious. I didn't even know what I was eating when you asked if I'd moved to Oregon, I said, trying to smile. She laughed weakly. It was pulled pork. We left the hospital around midnight. I drove her home in silence. She didn't ask me to come up. I didn't offer. She texted me the next morning. Thanks for being there. I know that was a lot. If you never want to see me again, I understand. I stared at the message for a long time. Eventually I replied, I think we're just looking for different kinds of certainty. She didn't respond. That was the last time I saw Navina. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she moved to Portland 3 months later. I hope she found what she was looking for. Me? I still like BBQs. Still go to Lennox's house for porch beers and cornhole when the weather's good. But now I hesitate before inviting someone too soon. Not out of fear, really, just caution. I used to think being boring kept you safe. That if you stuck to your routines, worked hard, kept your head down, didn't invite attention, then the world would mostly leave you alone. I was wrong. I'm a PhD student in biomedical statistics. I live by my calendar. Wake at 6 o'clock, coffee by 6:15, lab by 7 o'clock. I track sleep, monitor screen time, and meal prep every Sunday. I'm not unkind. I just don't have time for chaos. Joran arrived like a break in the pattern. He was loud in a way that didn't ask permission. We met at a campus mixer I only attended because my advisor cornered me into a bit of socializing. Joran was in a graduate architecture program, messy curls, cracked phone screen, and a laugh that made people turn their heads. He was too much, and I liked him anyway. He made me feel like my order was something to be admired, not mocked. Said I was built like a metronome, but sexier. He'd show up outside my lab with iced coffee and sticky notes that said things like, "You're 94% of my serotonin." He fit himself into my life like he was born to do it. We lasted 8 months. At first, it was good. Better than I expected. I let him leave his hoodie at my apartment. He started cooking for me on Sundays. He even tried to color code his Google Calendar to match mine. But he hated how much I worked. "You're always choosing the lab," he said. "Even when I'm right here." "I'm 2 years from defending," I reminded him. "This is temporary." He didn't believe in temporary. He believed in presence. We fought more. About time. About attention. About the way I stopped answering texts if I was in the middle of a dataset. Then he failed a studio review. Blamed the stress. Blamed me. "I can't date a robot," he said. "So I ended it." He cried. Threw up in my bathroom. Said he couldn't believe I was just walking away. But I was. I had to. He moved out of my apartment 2 days later. Left a single post-it on my fridge. "You'll look for me when the silence gets too loud." I threw it out. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. It started small. I'd come home from campus and find things slightly off. A drawer left open. A towel missing. A light on I didn't remember using. I assumed it was me. Burnout fog. Overwork. Then I noticed the hallway light flickering around 2 a.m., even when I hadn't walked past the motion sensor. Once, I found my bathroom mirror wiped clean when I knew I'd left it fogged. Still, I didn't let myself believe it could be him. I'm rational. I believe in evidence. In probability models. Not in ghosts. Not in paranoia. Then came the email. Sent from an address I didn't recognize. No subject. Just one sentence. "Your key hook is missing a set." I stared at it for a long time. My spare key. Gone. I hadn't noticed. I kept it on a hook behind a small hanging plant. He'd seen it before. He knew. I changed the locks that night, and for the first time in years, I didn't sleep at home. I booked a hotel near the campus and told myself I was overreacting, but I still double-locked the door and shoved a chair under the handle. The next day, I bought a set of smart cameras. 3 in total, 1 for the front door, 1 for the living room, and 1 for my office nook. I didn't want to feel watched, but I needed to know. For a week, nothing happened. No alerts. No movement. No signs of Joran. I started to relax. Even blamed stress again. Told myself I'd built a horror story out of nothing. Then one Friday, while I was in the lab prepping slides, my phone buzzed. Motion detected, living room camera. My stomach dropped. I checked the footage. There he was. Joran. Inside. Wearing a gray hoodie I'd never seen before, barefoot, moving slowly and deliberately around the apartment. He didn't take anything. Didn't break anything. He just looked. He opened a kitchen cabinet. Smelled one of my mugs. Sat on the couch and leaned back like he used to. Then he walked into my bedroom, out of frame. I called the police immediately. By the time they arrived, he was gone. But the footage was clear. They filed a report. Treated it seriously. Said I'd done the right thing. Promised to flag his name if any other incidents occurred. I sent the footage to my landlord. He agreed to replace the locks again and have the door reinforced. Joran texted me that night from a new number. "You let strangers into your home, but not me? I built that space with you." I blocked the number. 3 days later, I came home and found my bookshelf rearranged. Nothing stolen. Just reordered. Alphabetically. Joran knew how I shelved my books. He used to joke about it. That night, I stayed at a friend's place. Told her everything. She made tea and sat with me on the couch, one hand on mine while I stared at the camera app like it was a lifeline. "Do you want to press charges?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "but I want him to stop more than I want him punished." "He won't stop." I didn't say anything. She was right. The break-in that got him arrested wasn't a dramatic one. It was a Tuesday. I was in the lab, running a multi-hour protocol. I'd set my phone to do not disturb, but the camera alerts still came through. 1:13 p.m., motion detected, front door camera. 1:14 p.m., motion detected, living room camera. 1:15 p.m., motion detected, office camera. I checked the feed while wearing gloves and holding a pipette. He was inside again. This time he wasn't calm. He was pacing, talking to himself, holding a notebook, writing something, then tearing the pages out and stuffing them into my desk drawer. I called the police again. They arrived in 11 minutes. Found him still in the apartment, kneeling on my bedroom floor, crying. He didn't resist arrest. Didn't even speak. They found 5 keys on him. All duplicates. One labeled EM Home in pink marker. They also found a USB drive in his backpack, full of photos of me, screenshots of my academic calendar, a map with my daily route highlighted in 3 colors. I filed for a restraining order the next day. It was granted. He was charged with criminal trespass and stalking. Released on bail, but banned from contacting me. I moved into a different building across town. New locks, new number, new Wi-Fi. I don't post online anymore. People think you know danger when you see it, that it announces itself with a snarl, a shadow, a blade glinting in the light. But real danger smiles. It holds a door open. It compliments your earrings. It tells you about Japanese steel and the precise sound it makes slicing through fabric. I met Maurik at a cooking class. My therapist said I needed to reconnect with my body through tactile experiences. Pasta dough, apparently, was more therapeutic than I expected. It was one of those trendy workshops where you make your own ravioli while drinking wine in a room that smells like basil and warm flour. He stood across from me, rolling dough with clinical precision. He had long hands, beautiful hands, the kind that looked like they could draw blood or write poems, depending on the mood. He wore a black button-down, sleeves rolled to the elbow, and spoke with that low, careful tone men use when they want you to lean in. We paired up for plating. He complimented my knife skills, said he collected them, told me the names of knives I'd never heard of, judo, nikiri, karambit, and described their edges like he was talking about lovers. I laughed. He didn't. After class, he asked if I wanted to grab a drink. We went to a bar nearby. Cozy, red-lit, the kind of place where you can hear the clink of every ice cube. He told me he was a freelance designer, did branding for high-end restaurants, worked from home, liked silence when he worked. He asked about my job. I told him I was a copywriter and that most of what I wrote was so boring it could be used in sleep studies. He smiled. Words are scalpels when used right. I don't know why I found that charming. Maybe I was lonely. Maybe I'd grown bored with safe. He asked if I wanted to come back to his place for one more drink. I hesitated. He said, I have a bottle of Japanese whiskey I've been saving. Only open it for people who matter. I said yes. His apartment was quiet. Too quiet. It was on the 5th floor of a building with no elevator. The windows were large and bare. No art on the walls. Just a single leather couch, a wooden chair, and a bookshelf filled with books about metallurgy, combat history, and anatomy. I noticed the knives first. A small display case on the wall, lit from above like a museum exhibit. 6 blades, each sitting in its own velvet groove. He saw me looking. Those are my travel set, he said. The good ones are in storage. He poured the whiskey. No ice. No water. Just 2 fingers in a heavy glass. We sat on the couch. Talked. He was intense but not aggressive. He asked questions but never too many. Told me I had deliberate energy. Said it like a compliment. Then he excused himself to the bathroom. Back in a minute, he said. Don't move. And that's when I saw it. A chair I hadn't noticed before, tucked just behind the kitchen counter, barely in view. On it, a black cloth roll, open like a surgeon's kit. Inside, a set of knives. Not cooking knives. Combat knives. Different shapes. Curved. Serrated. One with a hooked tip. And beside it, a roll of gray duct tape. Neatly placed. Like it was waiting. My mouth went dry. I stood up slowly, quietly, walked to the door. It was locked. A twist lock. Easy enough. I turned it and stepped into the hallway, heart pounding so hard I thought it might echo. I didn't run. Not right away. I walked down 3 flights before I started. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing the chair. The way the knives were laid out. Not tossed, not forgotten, but staged. I told myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe he was just a collector. Maybe the duct tape was something else. But I knew better. The precision. The placement. The timing. It wasn't an accident. The next morning, he texted. You left your glass. Everything okay? I didn't respond. He texted again that afternoon. Not sure what happened last night. You seem fine. Hope you got home safe. Still nothing from me. That evening. Was it something I said? I liked our time together. Would love to see you again. I blocked his number. Then I checked my door locks. Twice. 3 days passed. Then I got the envelope. No return address. Inside, a single photo. Of me. Taken from across the street. I was sitting at a cafe with my friend, laughing. On the back, written in tiny, slanted handwriting. I see the deliberate energy now. I moved out of my apartment 2 weeks later. Didn't report it. Didn't call the cops. I didn't have proof. Just a feeling. A chair. And the memory of 6 knives, laid out like they were waiting to be chosen. I knew something was off the moment he hugged me. Not because it felt wrong exactly, but because it didn't feel like him. Orion and I had been texting for a month. We met through a niche photography forum, both of us obsessed with analog cameras, both of us still loyal to 35mm film like it was a religion. Our conversations had started with equipment talk, then moved into music, then late-night voice notes about nothing in particular, the kind of digital intimacy that builds quietly and quickly. He had a dry sense of humor, used punctuation in his texts, and once sent me a photo of a dead moth on a windowsill with the caption, "Even decay knows how to pose." I liked him, so when he asked to meet for coffee, I said yes without hesitation. We chose a spot in Lincoln Square, quiet, with overgrown plants and mismatched chairs. A place that felt like it had soft corners. He said he'd meet me out front. When I saw him, I smiled. He looked just like his photos, tall, lean, messy curls, a faded denim jacket I recognized from an old selfie. But when he hugged me, his hand pressed too firmly against my back. Orion always described himself as deliberately awkward in real life. He'd said he wasn't a hugger, that he flinched when people used too much cologne, that he preferred to wave hello like a cartoon character. This guy smelled like cedarwood and hugged like he'd done it 100 times. I stepped back. "Hey," he said, voice smooth, smile easy. "Lilith? That's me." He nodded. "Good to finally meet you." I stared at him for half a beat too long. "Something wrong?" he asked. "No," I said. "Just, you look taller than I imagined." He chuckled. "Camera angles." We walked inside. The conversation didn't match the texts. He was too confident, too polished. Orion always took a moment to gather his thoughts, typed in lowercase even when voice-to-text was easier, and once admitted he rehearsed things before saying them aloud. This guy, whoever he was, didn't pause once. When I asked about his favorite darkroom process, he blinked and said, "Honestly, I haven't developed anything in a while. Been more into digital stuff lately." Orion hated digital. He once called it too clean, too obedient. I stirred my coffee and locked eyes with him. "You're not Orion," I said. He froze for half a second, then smiled. "What makes you say that? You just said you shoot digital. People change. In 3 days?" He leaned back in his chair, jaw tightening. I waited. Then he exhaled. "You're right," he said. "I'm not." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "My name's Caius. I'm his twin." I stared at him. "What the hell does that mean?" He looked genuinely apologetic. He asked me to come instead. "Why?" He said he wasn't feeling it anymore, that the energy had shifted, but he didn't want to ghost you. "So he sent you?" Caius shrugged. "I didn't want to, but he said you were cool and that you might not notice." I noticed. "Yeah," he said. "I can see that." I stood up. "Lilith." "No," I said louder than I meant to. "This is insane." "Who does that?" I told him it was a bad idea. "But you still came." I was curious. I laughed, short and sharp. "Curious? You talked about him like you already knew him. I wanted to see what made you different." "I'm not different," I snapped. "I'm just someone who thought she was meeting a person who meant what he said." He had the decency to look away. I grabbed my coat. He stood too. For what it's worth, he really did like you. Not enough to show up himself. I walked out. Didn't look back. That night, I got a message from Orion. I panicked. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel like a joke." I didn't reply. He sent another. "Caius said you knew right away." "Of course you did." And then, "I'm not good in person. I thought I could avoid messing it up." I stared at the screen, then deleted the thread. When you're 17, you don't expect danger to look like someone who's been in your living room a dozen times. Stellan was the son of my dad's old friend from college. Their families had stayed in touch for years, mostly through holiday cards and the occasional backyard party. When Stellan and his parents moved back to Kentucky, it almost felt like a reunion. Stellan was 5 years older than me, 22. At the time, that made him seem like an adult, full of stories, confidence, and a kind of practiced ease I mistook for charm. He'd talk to my dad about politics and then turn to me and ask what I was reading. He had a dimple when he smiled, and he always remembered what I'd said last time we talked. I didn't think it was weird at first. He complimented my drawings, laughed at my jokes, said I was more mature than girls my age. I'd heard that line before from boys at school and rolled my eyes. But when Stellan said it, it felt like praise, not a trap. I didn't tell anyone I had a crush on him. It would have sounded embarrassing, like a kid with a fantasy. But I started wearing mascara when I knew he'd be around. Started staying in the room longer when he visited. Started listening harder when he spoke. One afternoon, after a family cookout, he asked if I wanted to see his car. It was a vintage Mustang he was refurbishing, and I said yes. He let me sit in the driver's seat and showed me how the stereo worked. Then he took a photo of me and said, "You look like a girl in a song." I laughed. He didn't. That was the first time I felt something in my stomach shift. He started texting me after that. Not often, just enough to feel flattering. He'd send memes, ask about school, then toss in a compliment like, "Your art style is wild. You've got real vision." I responded, "Of course I did." It felt good to be seen. Then the messages got heavier. "I had a dream about you." Weird, right? "I know you're young, but you're not a kid. There's something rare about you. I can't stop thinking about your eyes. You ever realize how dangerous they are?" I didn't know what to say. I stopped replying, but he kept sending them. When I told him to stop, he said, "I'm not doing anything wrong. You're the one who made it weird." I blocked his number. He made another, then another. That fall, I started noticing him near my school. Once across the street from the parking lot. Once at the gas station down the block, leaning against his car. Then outside the art supply store, where I went to buy charcoal pencils. He never approached. Just watched. I told my dad. He said, "Stellan? No way. He's harmless." I told my mom. She said, "Maybe you misunderstood." I stopped telling them. One night, I came outside to find my car tires slashed. All four. The next week, someone left a sketchbook on my windshield. It was mine. One I'd thrown away months ago. Inside, he'd scribbled over the pages with red ink. Circles around the self-portraits. Notes in the margins. "Why did you stop drawing your mouth? Eyes like knives." I brought it to the school counselor. She said she'd notify administration, but unless I had proof it was him, there wasn't much they could do. I stopped parking in the school lot. Started getting rides with a friend. Stopped walking alone, even in daylight. He followed me once. From school to the library. From the library to a friend's house. I lost him by ducking into a coffee shop and waiting in the bathroom until I was sure he was gone. I told my friend's mom. She believed me. She let me stay the night. Called my parents. Told them I wasn't safe. Then they believed me too. Sort of. My dad confronted Stellan's father. I wasn't there, but I heard the aftermath. Raised voices. Denial. Accusations. Stellan said I was imagining things. That I was obsessed with him and embarrassed about it. His dad believed him. Mine didn't know what to believe. I stopped going to family events. Stopped answering unknown numbers. Started locking my bedroom window, even when it was 90 degrees and the fan was broken. Then one night, I heard tapping. Not loud. Just gentle. Rhythmic. On my window. I live on the second floor. I froze. Didn't move. He tapped 3 more times. Then I heard him whisper, "Are you awake?" I didn't answer. Didn't breathe. Eventually he left. The next morning, I found a note under the doormat. "You're lucky I'm patient." I showed it to my parents. That time, they called the police. He denied everything. Said he was out of town that night. Said I was framing him. Said I'd made up the whole thing. But the officer believed me. Helped us file a restraining order. It was approved. Stellan moved out of state a month later. To Michigan, I heard. I still draw. Still write in the margins. Still flinch when I hear tapping. Sometimes I see a Mustang, and my chest tightens until I know it's not his. I never got an apology. But I got my life back.